Hi, I like to think that over the years I've accumulated enough wisdom and knowledge to truly appreciate the value of relationships, whether they be with family or friends.
I got family.
So what I do now is I keep a list of people that I try to keep in contact with. These are people who either have certain qualities or character traits that I admire or that I wish to learn from, or are people who simply share a common view of life. Like we simply have a passion for similar things. So every now and then I just randomly go through my list and I start calling up people. I meet them up if I can. I'm not gonna be dramatic saying it's like a sudden life-altering transformation, like everything everywhere all at once all of a sudden is all different. That's a lot of alls. But it is life-changing and I can feel the impact sinking in. So today I wanna share with you why. Why interpersonal relationships are so crucial to life and why you should purposefully maintain it. And how. Now, I wanna get into the scientific side of this. Bear with me. In the late 30s, there was this study conducted by Harvard, which became the longest running psychological study of all time. It's called the Harvard Grant Study. It followed 268 male students throughout their lifetime, and now the study is on to a second generation. It found that the happiest, healthiest, and oftentimes most successful people were those who had close bonds with other people in their lives. The psychologist directing the study, George Vaillant, wrote in an article saying, 70 years of evidence that our relationships with other people matter, and matter more than anything else in the world. In an interview, he summed up their findings in one single word, and that word was love. I personally find this extremely intriguing because from a biblical point of view, Jesus said that if you boil down the Bible into 2 commandments, well, they would be to love God with all your heart, mind, and soul, and to love others as yourself. So both from a religious and psychological point of view, the core of the human experience is simply love. And love shapes us from the earliest relationships we have, when we were infants. During the first year of life, the baby's brain is changing drastically. Think of it as a construction site. It's building all these new neuron networks to adapt to life's newly given stimulations, and that's basically how we learn. For instance, the more you speak a certain language, the more the related neuron circuits in your brain are activated, and thus they become stronger and more efficient. The less you activate a circuit, the weaker it becomes. And that's the same with all brain-mediated functions, including the capability to love. The more you're loved, properly loved, the more you develop the ability to love. And this extends into adulthood. Even though the adult brain doesn't change as radically as it does during infancy, but the adult mind still continues to grow on a use-dependent condition. Research conducted at the University of Chicago by the now late Professor John Cacioppo indicates that loneliness triggers a threat response in the brain, just as when we feel pain, hunger, thirst, or fear. Loneliness significantly increases the risk of death from stroke and heart disease. It just shows how much we human beings are wired to be social, relational beings. Another study by Professor Naomi Eisenberger at UCLA indicates that social support acts as a buffer against potential stresses. People with higher social support are found to be less sensitive to things like rejection. They are less stress responsive, and they even produce less cortisol, which is a stress hormone. And yet another study, we're getting there, it shows that when people verbally repeat what they're learning, what it does is it activates different parts in the brain, such as memory, language, motion, etc., and thus leaving more connection clues. And as a result, recalling that memory becomes easier, and both learning pace and the capability to adapt that information to other situations are enhanced. So when you have more people to talk to, it's quite obvious what benefits that brings.
Cookies! For me to share with me good friend.
Verbal communication also plays a crucial role in the treatment of depression, which is why companionship is very important to people who are undergoing it. So that's the science part of it. Now, a challenge that we face nowadays is imposed by the so-called social media. Social connections cannot be replaced by social media, yet social media is encroaching time that we would have spent on real connections. The hundreds of likes you receive do not have even the slightest similar effect as face-to-face interaction. As a matter of fact, phone calls are better than texting, video calls are better than mere audio calls, and genuine in-person interaction is incomparable. I actually have a story about this. Back when I was in my senior year in college, I intentionally canceled my internet service, mostly because I was spending too much time online. So whenever I had to use the internet for schoolwork, I would drag myself to the library, which by the way is a great place for acquiring knowledge. I strongly recommend it to you. And inadvertently, that led me to calling up or calling on my classmates more often because I didn't have any internet access. And at the library, I was meeting more people in real life instead of typing away on my computer. That was the happiest year for me in college. Social connections are vital to our existence. It's the key driver to happiness, and happiness leads to success. So how do we build up and maintain healthy interpersonal relationships? Here is where I would like to refer to what Stephen Covey brought up in his book, The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, a metaphor of emotional savings. Whenever you do something good and do it the right way for someone, you are making a deposit in your emotional account. Conversely, if you act in a negative way, you make a withdrawal from your account. You are to, with all your might, prevent yourself from going bankrupt. On the other hand, strive to become wealthy, and there are 6 ways you can do that. The first is seeking to understand other people. This is the mother of all deposits. Like, who doesn't want to be understood? If you talk to me about soccer, football,
don't worry about it. Soccer just sounds cool.
No, it doesn't.
It sounds cool?
No, it doesn't.
like we could go on for hours. If you talk to me about quantum physics, quote unquote, one person's mission is another person's minutiae. I actually had to look up that word, minutiae. Second, attend to the little things. Little acts of politeness and kindness, a smile could, make a person's day. Like, admit it, we're all sensitive inside. And on the flip side, we do each have our own emotional triggers. Just one touch and we're like, boom. A couple years ago, I was on one of these short-term study tours as a guest. There were around like 20 students. One day I got an email, and this was like months after the trip. The student wrote to me, "I'm sorry for bothering you, but there's something I need to get off my chest. Do you remember that day me and my roommates showed up late in the morning? While we got on the school bus, I noticed you had a grouchy face, and I felt very hurt." Well, first of all, she was late to be fair, right?
Exactly!
But I wrote back to her immediately to apologize for hurting her feelings, and I also told her my side of the story. And that was, I was sick that morning. I actually had a fever, so I most likely didn't have the most positive facial expression that morning. I knew somebody was late, but I probably didn't even notice them getting on the bus. But it just shows how these little things can affect other people in the most unexpected ways.
Oh, come on!
Third, keep your commitments. This is probably my biggest trigger. I can't stand being stood up without notice. It just triggers me, I admit it. I have a friend who I worked with on a school event back in the days, and he didn't keep a certain promise he should have to the participants of the event. I told him to make up for it, but he just, well, never mind. Like, we're still friends, but I probably wouldn't do business with him. Number 4, clarify expectations. This refers to the different roles you play in life. Like, you could be an employee, a supervisor, father, husband, and each role has its own duties. Now, the tricky thing is, all the people connected to you have different expectations of these roles. So the wisest thing for you to do is to get things straight, to understand each other expectation-wise, so you can refrain from any misunderstanding. I can easily provide a bad example. So when I got my first job on training day 1, it was going on until 6 p.m. and it seemed like it was going on forever. And I had plans that night that I prearranged a couple weeks ago, so I actually had the nerves, the ignorance, and I was such an idiot to ask my boss,
Can I go?
You should have seen the look on my boss's face.
What are you talking about?
So my expectations were, oh, I'm gonna keep work-life balance. And my boss was like, no, you're not. And for the next couple of years, I was working 12 to 14 hours a day in that industry. At least 2 of my female colleagues were dumped by their boyfriends for always working too late. Bags. They say they went to see The Devil Wears Prada and they were bawling inside the theater. Poor girls. They're married anyways. But that's just another example of difference of expectations. Oh, this is such an important job. This is my first job. I gotta do it well. No, your job is not everything in the world. What about me? It's over. So, clarify expectations. The 5th way to deposit in your emotional account would be to show personal integrity. Personal integrity generates trust, and as I said, I probably wouldn't do any business with any person who does not show integrity, because once an X, always an X.
You know what? You ain't never gonna change!
While forgiving is a beautiful virtue that I most likely need to work on, but personality change does take a lot of intentional effort, and it's really hard. So once you lose your credibility in other people's eyes, it's just really hard to regain their trust. So be a person of integrity. Last, the 6th way is to apologize sincerely whenever you make a withdrawal. It takes a great deal of character strength to apologize out of one's heart, but when you do, people feel it. Remember when I got that email from a student on a study tour? When I apologized to her, even though it was on email, I did that genuinely because I made her feel bad. Like, I could have easily rationalized or justified my behavior that morning because I was feeling ill after all, right? But no, I chose to cater to her feelings because she felt hurt. And since then, I think we're good. I think. So those are the 6 ways mentioned by Stephen Covey of how to build and maintain and deepen relationships. Close and supporting interpersonal relationships are the core to happiness, and it takes heartfelt and intentional effort to build and maintain long-lasting ones. So get off your phone. Follow your friends on Instagram as much as you want, but take time out of your fubbingly busy day to meet and greet them in person, because this will be the life-changing habit that you will be glad you instilled when you think of it 10 years from now. Love you guys. God bless you. Peace.